We're going to close the fourth chapter of Bava Metzia today. And this is essentially the chapter of, well, we called it price gouging or fraud. And we've seen that at one level, the Mishnah is keen to constrain, to limit the scope of halakha, of rules about price gouging. So there are certain things like land or documents that just can't be priced properly. But while on the other hand, the Mishnah is also keen to expand the scope to include, for example, embarrassing somebody in public. In other words, gouging someone with words rather than with finance. And the chapter is going to close with what we might call, or what the Mishnah calls, gneva ein, stealing the eye. So making something look like something it is not. And it will even touch on issues like advertising, which are really very, very topical today. But it's going to begin, we're going to begin with really simple issues of just mixing and concealment. Ein arvin perot b'perot. We don't mix produce with produce. We don't mix, the Bava says, produce from one field with produce from another field. We don't mix two kinds of produce. Afidu chadashim b'chadashim. Even new produce with new produce. Afidu chadashim b'chadashim. So even if it's the same crop, if these are apples from two orchards, we don't mix them together when we sell them. And the Mishnah continues, Ein tzorech lomar chadashim b'yashanim. And needless to say, we don't mix new with old. We wouldn't mix this year's crop with last year's held over in cold storm. Be'emet, in truth. And the Mishnah, the Gemara rules that when we see the word be'emet, in truth, we have a halakha here. Be'emet, in truth. B'yayin hitiru la'arev kashevarach. In truth, they did permit kasher. It's translated here as sharp. Maybe that's a good word, sharp, or, well, we've all drunk sharp wine, a little bit, let's say a little bit tanniny. And I think probably in the time of the Mishnah, a lot of wine was tanniny. But yain hitiru arev kashevarach. They permitted sharp wine to be mixed with gentle wine, with less strong wine. Mipnei shehu mashbicho, because it improves it. So, in other words, we can create mixtures if the intention is to improve the quality of the produce. And of course, anybody that knows about winemaking knows that it's actually very common, very, very common to mix different kinds of wine in order to produce a balanced product. And in Champagne, they've been doing this for years, but many other winemakers do this too. So we can mix if that is the purpose, if we're not intending to deceive. So there is a principle here, and we're guided by the principle. So along the same lines, ein ma'arvin shimrei yain b'yain. So we don't mix lees, shimrei yain. If we let wine settle in the vat or in the bottle for a long time, we'll see that it starts to create sediment at the bottom of the vat. Of course, this sediment belongs to the wine. So it should be possible to sell a bottle of wine with its sediment. But of course, we can't bulk up the volume of wine that we're selling by bringing in sediment from another vintage. Maybe, for example, the barrel already had sediment in it when we poured the wine in. Ein arvin shimrei yain b'yain. We can't mix sediment or lees with wine. Aval noten lo et shmarav, but we can give him its own lees, its own sediment. In other words, we can sell wine with the normal sediment that comes with that bottle. Me, shenitarev mine b'yeino. Someone who mixes, someone who mixed water in with his wine. And again, this is very, very common in the time of the Mishnah. Generally, when you serve wine, you serve it mixed. We'll see this in the Mishnah. We have seen this in the Mishnah, 10th chapter of Pesachim. So, limzog et hakos, to pour out the wine is actually to mix the wine, to mix it with water. So they used to mix wine when they served it, but not when they sold it. You mix it when you serve it, not when you sell it. Misha nit arav mine b'yeno. So someone who's mixed water with his wine, lo yimkarenu b'chanut, shouldn't sell it in a store. Eila im kain hodia. He shouldn't sell it in a store unless he informs him. In other words, again, we're going back to the principle of stealing the eye. We have to make a declaration if we're selling wine that's been let down. And just in case there's any possibility of doubt, velo latagar, and not to a merchant. This means never to a merchant. Afal pisha hu modio. Even if he informed him, we cannot sell to a wine merchant wine that's been let down with water, because it would only be to deceive with it. This merchant is then going to sell it on. This merchant will sell it on without declaring the provenance. And we're going to set off a chain of effectively adulterated wine, mixed down wine, going down the food chain. But in a place where they're accustomed to put water in wine, they may do so. So everything goes according, effectively, to common knowledge, to custom. The principle is we don't steal someone's mind. And we'll see now these words actually stealing the eye. We don't steal the eye. We'll see this come in as the chapter closes. And of course, we said before that the last Mishnah in a chapter is always very significant. So let's keep going. The same principles. Hadagar notel mechamesh granot. So a merchant can buy from 5 threshing floors, venoten letoch megura achat, and put the produce into one storage bin, into one silo. Mechamesh kitot venoten letoch pitos echad, and he can take from 5 wine presses and put into one barrel or one jug, as long as he doesn't intend to mix them. And the Bartanura again says something very, very significant here. He doesn't intend to mix them. And the Bartanura explains what intending to mix here. To announce that he's going to purchase the majority from a praiseworthy place. So we're intending not only to mix, but to deceive. And to mix in from another place. And of course, the neighbors think that all the produce is from that same place, i.e. the good place. We can't buy top quality grapes and then mix them in with lower quality grapes. We can't deceive. And the Mishnah is now going to broaden. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, lo yichalek hachanvani kalayot ve'egozim latinokot. Rabbi Yehuda says a storekeeper shouldn't distribute a dry corn or nuts to children. So they didn't have sweets in those days, but they used to hand out corn and nuts. Rabbi Yehuda doesn't like it. Because that accustoms them to come to him. They drag their parents to him. And interestingly, the sages actually permit it. And we'll go backwards and forwards on the same lines. Lo yifchot et hashar. He shouldn't lower the price. There's a tension in the Gemara, by the way, about competition. Is competition good, or does it allow merchants to be driven out of business? And the sense here seems to be that he shouldn't lower the price to drive his competitors out of business. But again, v'chachamim omrim, the sages come back and say, Zachur latov, let him be remembered for good. In other words, competition is good for the market. Competition is good for the market. Lo yavor et hagrisim. He shouldn't sift crushed beans. Kedivrei Abba Shaul v'chachamim matirim. And the sages permit. He shouldn't sift crushed beans. In other words, to take the rubbish out of his beans. But again, the sages are going to permit it. But modim, they agree. Shelo yavor al pi mugura. He shouldn't sift them at the entry of the silo or the entry of the storage chamber. In other words, he can't. If we're going to sift out the beans, we have to sift it throughout. We can't just sift it at the top of the pile or the entry of the silo. Because that would just be a thief of the eye. Yeah, we can't steal someone's eye. We can't deceive. Ein mefarkasin. We don't beautify. We don't beautify stuff. Lo et adam. We don't beautify a human. This must be a Canaanite slave who's offered for sale in the market. We don't beautify a human. Velo et behema. We don't beautify an animal. Velo et kelim. We don't beautify utensils. In other words, when we're selling something, we have to disclose. We have to disclose so that what you see is what you get as far as the buyer's concerned. That's the bottom line, and that's really the conclusion of the 4th chapter of Bava Metzia. When we're trading, we have to disclose. We have to make the situation such that the buyer gets what the buyer sees.